Hey guys, it's Jasma, and today we're going to make traditional egg custard mooncakes. Last year I made snowy mooncakes and they quickly became one of my most popular videos, and I got some requests to make more. If you want to check that video out, the link will be in the description down below. This year we're making traditional mooncakes. Unlike the snowy mooncakes, you'll have to bake them in an oven. I personally prefer this type of mooncakes more because I really like the texture and how they taste. The egg custard filling is very delicious. There are a few ingredients to making these, but once you get the hang of it, they are quite simple. They're very pretty, delicious, and perfect as a little treat or gift that you could give to your friends and family for this moon festival. So let's get started. First, we're going to make the egg custard filling. We're going to start off by mashing the salted duck egg yolks. I found this in a Chinese supermarket. It was sold separately from the entire egg. If you can't find this, you can buy a whole salted duck egg and separate it yourself, but make sure it is cooked. We're going to mash this by pushing it through a fine sieve, and this is just going to make it nice and fine so you won't have clumps inside of the filling. If it is a little hard to mash, you can microwave it to soften it up a little bit. The salted duck egg yolks really adds a nice texture to the filling, and it also adds a nice salty flavor, so I do not suggest you to skip this. Next, we're going to mix together the three powders in this filling. We have custard powder, cornstarch, and milk powder. You can find the custard powder in a grocery store, and unfortunately you can't substitute it. And then just mix it all through. And now we're going to mix together the liquids. So I have light cream, coconut milk, condensed milk, and vanilla extract, and I'm just going to mix them all together. It would be best if all of the ingredients were at room temperature. We're just going to mix. I moved over to a stand mixer. You can also use a hand mixer if you want to. And I'm using a whisk attachment. I'm going to add in my softened unsalted butter. And it is important that everything is at room temperature here. And we're also going to add in the white granulated sugar, add in the mashed salted egg yolks, and we're just going to blend this until it's nice and combined and fluffy. Always remember to scrape down the bowl every once in a while. Now we're going to pour in the powders, add in the white ingredients, and mix until nice and smooth. I add both of the mixtures in at once because there's a lot of liquids inside of this mixture and it will cause the butter to curdle. So I like to add the powder in as well. And another thing to do is, again, just make sure everything is at room temperature, and that will prevent the butter from curdling as much. Transfer the filling into a stainless steel bowl, and I like to use stainless steel when I'm steaming things because I find that it conducts heat a lot better. Fill a pot halfway with water and place in a rack. The rack should be higher than the water level because this is where the bowl is going to sit while we're steaming. Put the lid on and turn the heat to high and let the water boil. Once it starts to boil, place the bowl into the pot and let it sit on the rack. Fold up a piece of paper towel and stick it between the lid and the pot. And this is just going to create a slant for the lid to sit on. This way the condensation of the water vapor doesn't drip into the filling. We're going to let it steam for 20 minutes. Once 20 minutes is up, take off the lid, turn the heat down to medium-low, and we're going to give the entire mixture a stir. Now you should notice that the cooked parts are on the outside on the top, but the center is still really gooey and liquidy. If you just let it steam the way that it is and you don't stir it at all, then it would take longer and it would be quite dry. So I'm just going to give everything a mix with a spatula to combine the cooked parts and the still liquid mixture. This is going to make it look like a dough, and it should look kind of transparent. Once you mix everything through, place the lid back on with a piece of paper towel in between and let it steam for 5 more minutes. Make sure to keep an eye on the time when you're steaming the filling, because if you oversteam it, then it would be a really dry mixture, and if you understeam it, then it would be a really wet mixture and it might cause the mooncakes to crack later on when it's baking. The filling is now cooked, so I'm going to transfer it to a nice clean glass bowl, and this is just going to help cool it down quicker because the bowl is already cold. Place a piece of plastic wrap on top after the filling is at room temperature and place it into the fridge for it to cool down completely. And by doing this, we're solidifying the butter, and this is going to help bring the dough together later on when we're shaping it and weighing it. For the crust, we're going to start off by mixing together the dry ingredients. So I have all-purpose flour, cornstarch, salt, milk powder, and custard powder. Now the ingredients for the filling and for the crust are very similar, so that's just something that I really like about this recipe. Pour in the cornstarch, milk powder, custard powder, and a little bit of salt. Next, we're going to mix together the wet ingredients. So once again, we have the light cream, coconut milk, and condensed milk. And we're just gonna mix until combined. I moved over to my stand mixer, and for the crust, I am using a paddle attachment. And starting off, I'm gonna pour in the softened unsalted butter. You should always be able to squish the butter nice and easily. Okay, pour in the sugar and start mixing until nice and fluffy. Scrape the bowl again. And to that, I'm going to pour in all of the wet ingredients. And again, make sure this is at room temperature or the mixture will separate. And mix it. Just mix the wet ingredients in until it's combined like so, and then you could add in the dry ingredients. You can also add in the wet ingredients and the dry ingredients at the same time. I'm going to transfer the dough onto a piece of plastic wrap. We're just going to fold it up and press it nice and flat. The flatter you press it, the quicker it would take to chill the dough. And now we're just going to place this into the fridge for it to chill for 15 to 20 minutes. I placed my filling into the fridge for it to completely cool down. It should feel a little stiffer now, and I'm just going to knead it a little bit so I can knead the butter and fat back into the filling. I have a plate here and I lined it with some plastic wrap just to make sure that my filling doesn't stick to it. And I placed it on top of an electric scale just to weigh it a lot easier. I'm going to be measuring out my filling as 30 grams because I'm using a mold that holds 50 grams of the mooncake, and I like a little more filling than the dough. So I'm using 30 grams of filling and 20 grams of the dough. My dough has now chilled for around 20 minutes. It is now stiff but not completely solid because you want to still be able to work with it. I have a cutting board here and I'm just going to flip this on there because I want to knead it a little bit. Now we can start to weigh the dough, 20 grams each. My filling and my crust has now chilled. They just stiffened up a little bit to make it easier to handle. And now we can start to form the mooncakes. First off, make sure that your oven is now preheated at 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and you want to prepare a baking tray and line it with some parchment paper so that the mooncakes don't stick. You also want your mooncake molds ready. You don't have to use a mooncake mold if you don't care about the appearance of the mooncakes. You can just wrap it together and that's it. But I do like to make my mooncakes pretty, so I'm going to be using them today. I'm using 2 different designs and lots of other different floral stencils. Of course, you could use whatever you like. I have some all-purpose flour here just to make sure that nothing sticks. Here's a quick hack for you when it comes to cleaning the mooncake molds. You see, after you wash the stencils, there's going to be water inside of those tiny areas, and even after you try to get the water out with a paper towel, it's still going to be in there because it's a very tiny space for the paper towel to fit. So a hack for you is to dip it inside of some all-purpose flour, make sure it's really nicely coated, and then just tap off any excess. And you can see the flour gets stuck in the water, and that way it'll soak up all the water that you don't want. And then you could just take a toothpick to remove the clumps of flour. You want to make sure that you do this before you make the mooncakes because the water is going to make the mooncakes stick and you don't want that. Okay, I cleaned my stencil and now I'm going to place it into the mold. You just pop the stencil in and then you twist the top for it to stay there. And another thing you want to do before you make the mooncakes is to make sure you flour this mooncake mold. So I just put a little bit of flour in there. So you get the stencil all covered and then roll it around what you would do with a souffle ramekin. Tap out the excess. And this just ensures that the mold is perfectly coated with an even layer of flour and the mooncakes won't stick to it later on when you're pressing it. And now we could start to make the mooncakes. So grab a piece of the crust, and I like to just knead it up a little bit because I find that it actually helps when the dough is a little bit sticky because then it sticks to the filling right away and it gets rid of all the air pockets inside of the mooncake. So I'm going to knead it up. Now I'm going to use a rolling pin to roll out the dough until it's nice and flat and even. Place the filling on top of the crust and flip it over. And just smooth out the crust to make sure there's no air left. Flip it back over. Place it between your index finger and your thumb. And then just close it up. Just like that. Okay. I like to just pinch the ends close and then roll it around to seal it completely so you can no longer see it. Place the part that you sealed it on the bottom. Roll it between your hands to make a cylinder so you can fit it in the mooncake mold. If you have a square mold, you can just make it into a square, just as long as it fits. Place the mooncake mold carefully over the mooncake. Make sure the sides are not touching or you will scrape it. And press down firmly. Just carefully push and lift off. Use a toothpick to poke a hole on the bottom of each mooncake to prevent it from cracking as much while it's baking. I pressed out all of my mooncakes. Make sure your oven is now preheated at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. And before we bake it, I want to spray on a little bit of water. I have the spray bottle. You can brush it on if you want to, but that might mess up the design, so I would suggest the spray bottle. And spraying on water would just prevent it from cracking as much while it's baking. Make sure you don't spray on too much water or the dough will become soggy. So now I'm going to place it into the oven at 375 for 5 minutes. While the mooncakes are baking, I'm going to separate the egg yolk from the egg white, and I'm going to pass it through a sieve twice. This just ensures that it's nice and smooth and there are no lumps. Once the mooncakes is baked in the oven for 5 minutes, we're going to take it out and brush on a nice and thin layer of the egg yolk. Make sure to be gentle and don't brush on too much or else it will mess up the design of the mooncake. Now we're going to place them back in the oven and bake for another 5 minutes or so until the top is nice and golden brown and shiny. And I like to rotate the pan halfway through to make sure that everything browns nice and evenly. That's how you make traditional egg custard mooncakes. You can see these look so pretty. They have golden brown perfectly on top and they do still have their designs. This would be a perfect gift for your friends and family this moon festival. They taste delicious, and I would suggest you to let them cool and leave at room temperature for at least 1 night. The texture and the flavor is best then. And I like to microwave it a little bit before I eat it so it's still nice and warm and soft on the inside. Make sure to check out my 2 Snowy Mooncakes video from last year. The link will be in the description down below. Don't forget to subscribe and comment down below what you want me to make next. Thanks for watching and see you guys next time. Bye!